Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We are about to celebrate 21 years at WNST. Not nearly the 100 that my friends at Cole Roofing have over the years. I've got my Cole Roofing hat. I've got my Cole Roofing mug. And now I have Bill Cole from Cole Roofing here to do a little bit of summer therapy as we do. These pieces have quickly become some of my favorite pieces of the week because unlike everybody else, Bill, I feel like I can say anything to you.
Yeah, well, it's not going out to millions around the world either, so don't worry about it.
It's not on the internet or anything like
that.
So, look, I am surrounded, and I literally mean surrounded, by nothing but audio tapes, mini discs. They're like all – if I move the camera, you would see I have little micro tape machine players here that I've put stuff in for rock and roll. Dude, this is really going to happen in July. 21 years into this. The Orioles, I went to the game on Tuesday night. They're still in last place. They were losing 7-2 in the third inning, and I left in the fourth inning. Full disclosure. Full disclosure. I had tapes that I had to. I had my 10th anniversary show with Gary Williams that I had to transcribe and get on to digital here. I found stuff this week, Bill, and I want to ask you because your company was 100 years old. You spent a long time planning a big event that you did in the fall. I'm doing a whole month of celebrating here of 21 years. But what did you find in 100 years that you didn't know even existed? There had to have been something in the last year that you found that was some heirloom, some memento, some sheet of paper, some story your uncle told you didn't know about Cole Roofing. Because when you have 100 years, you start to hear stories, don't you?
Yeah, this is probably dodging your question a little bit, but what I was most taken back by was how inconsistent the stories are and how they change from person to person and how bad a job we did of collecting things along the way or we're saving mementos or any of that. Like, I think we're just consistently on the hamster wheel of putting our head down and working on the grind that, we have some nice letters from cusers.
This is the first piece of tar we ever laid on a roof.
There's just not a lot. Yeah, there just wasn't a lot, and that was sort of made it more of a challenge, I guess.
Well, I have mementos. Unlike you, I have almost everything here. I have the Nasty Monday show from October 15, 2001, and the Nasty Wednesday live in New York show during the Super Bowl or during the World Series in 2001. But they're on video cassette, and here's part of the problem with doing all this. I had 2 VCRs here 2 weeks ago, and I had about 40 of these VCR tapes that are, 4 hours, 6 hours long. And somewhere along the line, I chewed up both heads on the VCR player. So I have 2 dead VCRs on the ground. I've lost 2 cassette decks. Luckily, I have 2 more left. I have 1 mini disc deck that functions left and 1 handheld player that would need batteries. And I'm on life support with all of these old generation. I mean, there's only one way to make this tape play, Bill. You have to have a VCR to make it play. Then you have to have the wires to get it. Cassette decks, there's a million of those. But these mini discs, dude, this is probably the first time you've ever seen a mini disc. No one has these. By the way, this was the night Deion Sanders and Cordell Stewart were out at Putty Hill Station. I know that because Ray Bachman doesn't know how to spell Deion. He spelled it like Deion, run around so Deion. So
and that in maybe half of the people that listen to this have no idea what you're talking about.
What do you mean?
That's good.
Mini disc?
Mini disc, yeah.
Well, go watch the video on Facebook or LinkedIn.
8 tracks because we make jokes about 8 tracks. And VHS, they know, everybody knows and the jokes about VHS.
Well, I'm trying to give some people an idea of how big a mini disc is. It looks on the back, it looks like one of the, if I held it up big, it would look like one of those big old floppy discs, but it's a little tiny mini disc. And it went in a mini disc player. This format was popular for... Well, it never was popular, but it was a format that we used at the radio station because we had someone really – well, we didn't have anybody really smart at the station at the turn of the century. But what we did was we had this format. So I have thousands of mini discs, and if I told you what's on some of this is Super Bowl 40. So on one disc we have Derek Brooks, Dave McGinnis, Steve Sable, Ron Jaworski, Brian Baldinger, Kevin Frazier, by the way, Entertainment Tonight of Columbia, Maryland, and Rod Woodson, and I think that's all. And there's a couple of moons on here. Brenda Freese called in, too. So this is one little mini disc. So many of these, though, the mini disc format was big with my national show at the turn of the century. So Sporting News Radio also used minidisc as a format. So on every single one of these players, there is there's 40 interviews. That was the beauty of the minidisc format, is that it held lots of stuff. So there is my first ever interview with Drew Brees. He was still at Purdue. Dan Fouts, Bert Sugar. Let's see here. Who else is on this thing? Rod Woodson. Mel Blount. I had to look up whether he was a Hall of Famer or not. He is a Hall of Famer, by the way. So you will hear from Mel Blount next month on WNST. So I've gone through all these Hall of Fame interviews, dude. And I hope people listen to this stuff in July because it's really cool. But the reason I wanted to bring it up with you was that I found the Holy Grail. I'm surprised you didn't hear me screaming on Monday night from where you were. I found the first Ray Lewis tape. The night after the Barn, September 2nd, 1996, they beat the Raiders. I remember going into Memorial Stadium and asking Ray Lewis if he would come out and do the show. And he agreed to do the show. And the next night he came out. And that tape has been missing for 23 years. And I found it Monday night. I found a copy of it. And it was, as you can well imagine, not marked. It was unlabeled, unidentified. So I have some unidentified tapes, but I stumbled into the one tape I have been searching for 23 years, which is the Ray Lewis first night where I showed him how to eat a crab. We did talk about him going to the Hall of Fame that night. And by the way, the first time I had Ed Reed on, we did talk about Ed Reed going to the Hall of Fame. So I have two lengthy Ed Reed interviews from 2002. He never did my show again. I have about maybe a half dozen really long sit-downs with Ray Lewis from 96 and 97, 98. Then he got arrested in Atlanta, and he did sit with me. He sat with me at the Super Bowl in Miami in 2009. And then this press conference stuff. But I mean, I'm not running any of that. Anything that's running here on the station in July is me talking to someone who is in the Hall of Fame. And the first week and a half, it's going to be my personal Hall of Fame, which includes John Stedman, which includes all of my favorite interviews. They don't have to be the biggest stars. They are just the best work of my career. So the first 10 days, it'll be greatest hits, in totality, and most of the stuff's never been aired before. I'm trying not to air the stuff that I've done in the last 5 years. Figuring all of you know I went to the Super Bowl. You've heard some of the best of. Maybe you've heard the Art Modell thing. Maybe you've heard the Art Donovan sit-down. Although I found 3 more sit-downs with Art Donovan that have never run. I found 9 interviews with Lenny Moore that have only run if you heard them the day he was in studio in 2001 or 2004 or whatever it was. So, and in addition to that, then there's the whole litany of all-star games, Super Bowls, gold jackets, people who weren't Hall of Famers. I've got 5 conversations with Bert Blyleven talking about how excited he'll be if he ever gets in. Since he's gotten in, I've never had him on the show. So I have all of this stuff, and it's going to be back to back to back. So the entire month of July, I'm doing what you did back in April, which is celebrate. I'm not going to make it to 100 years here, Bill. I mean, WNST is not going to be 100 years old, so we better celebrate 21 because we can drink now.
Yeah, I'm curious, the first time you ever talked to Kyle Bowler, did he mention the Hall of Fame, or are you really 2 for 2, or is it 2 for 50?
Do you think I don't have the Kyle Bowler chats? Because I do, okay? I mean, if you want me to play them, the Orioles will have to be in last place again next July. Well, they will be. So maybe next year I'll play the Kyle Bowler and the Elvis Gerback tapes. How about that?
Yeah, is that a continuing theme that every guy that ever gets drafted is completely convinced he's going to the Hall of Fame, or do some just come in and I don't think I'm going to the Hall of Fame, but I can probably make a good living here, and I'll work hard.
By the way, do you remember Hard Knocks' first episode? You watched that one, right? With the Ravens.
Sure.
So you remember Ortiz Jenkins when he was going to leave Arizona and go to the Hall of Fame, and by the time he got to Baltimore, he was cut. The car was still running the turn. Do you remember that? I mean,
right.
He had a dream, and I knew who he was. He was a quarterback. He's a guy you'd seen play or whatever, saw his name, and never threw a pass in the NFL, but believed he was the chosen one, right?
Right.
And I think if you went around and talked to every kid that was taken in the 5th round or 6th round believes they're going to be Terrell Davis, they're going to be Tom Brady, they're going to be,
right.
the guy who
they
does
believe that
right?
if I work hard enough, I can get to the Hall of Fame. Sure. I think that they have to have that mindset. And Lord knows every coach they've had since they were 8 years old has been telling them, if you work hard enough, you can make it to the Hall of Fame.
All right,
because they were probably better than everyone else.
I'm doing a little history lesson while I have you on, so you're my therapy today. Were you, and you can be honest with me, because how old are you? You're a lot younger than me, so you were even younger than me then. In 1998, in 97, I acquired the station, and we moved in early 98, in August of 98. We found it in May. And then we had it for 15 months, and the guy who owned it sold it to Catholic Family Radio. We kind of went out of business. And then we came back 15 months later. It was the weekend that we beat the Jaguars in that crazy game, the Shannon Sharp game. And then we went to the Super Bowl, 12 weeks later, and WNST's been WNST ever since. So in 1998, in maybe March, I found out about the station. I walked through it sometime in early May. The guy that owned it was WKDB, KKD, Kids Broadcasting, KDB, WKDB. It's a guy named David Epler out of Rockville. He wasn't a very nice man. And he allowed me, because he had nothing running on the station anyway, I gave him the first month's rent ahead of time. So he allowed me to usurp the station in June and July and play what I wanted to play on the station as a sort of coming soon. Like it was like a billboard. It was like nobody knew where this radio station was at that time, and it was running a loop of pretty much like a couple of songs and a whole bunch of like kids' stories. It was kids' storytelling. It was like sort of Dr. Seuss-y. So I put together at that time, and it was in the summer of 1998, and we were like laying carpet in the station, building a studio, making sure satellite dishes worked, getting the phone company. It was like all of that stuff that we were doing, painting walls, moving stuff in. And the station, I could play anything I wanted on the station. And a guy named Matt Bender from Dundalk took all of my tapes in the summer of 1998, I think it was the spring of 98, and turned them into 6 discs. Now, why would we have 6 discs, Bill? Because we had a 6-disc CD player.
Right.
That if we had an 8-disc player, there would have been 8 discs.
Right.
And at that time, nobody knew how to burn CDs. I mean, it was like pre-Napster, literally 1998, right? So
Right.
Matt Bender had a machine, probably cost a lot of money at the time, and he burned down 6 CDs of our greatest hits, my greatest hits, and the station, and what was to come. And these were the 6 CDs that ran WNST in June and July of 1998. So you can see on here Art Modell, Billy Joel, Bill Walton, Ray Miller, who was still the pitching coach, Art Donovan, Donnie Most on all of these. If anybody remembers driving around in the summer of 98 and hearing these, throw me a note. Gary Williams, Bam Morris, Peter Angelos, Chris Berman, Lee Steinberg, my infamous golf tirade, and Art Modell. And then there was the time Tony Gwynn called in and talked to Art Donovan at the barn. How about that? Tony Gwynn, one Hall of Famer talking to another Hall of Famer. You're going to hear that. Steve Lavin, Dick Vitale, Jim Harbaugh, the Harbaugh we don't talk about, Donnie Most, Jim Rome, Tom Glavine, Mark Grace, Buddy Ryan, and Lawrence Taylor were doing a television show with me at that time. Larry King was a big listener. Larry King listened to me on the way in. He would always tell me what I said on the air that day because he listened, literally, going to Camden Yards. John Ogden, the future Hall of Famer, Karch Karai, Hootie and the Blowfish, Bobby Cremins, the late, great Paul McGuire, Junior Seau's on this tape here. So this was the stuff that I ran in the summer of 1998. Not all of these. Christy Martin is not a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, Patrick Johnson did not go to the Hall of Fame. There's a great example of a draft pick. Patrick Johnson was a draft pick. We thought he was going to go to the Hall of very fast, and he didn't. Now, John Stedman is in my Hall of Fame, so Steady is going to be a part of this. So I have my Hall of Famers and then real Hall of Famers, but beginning the second week of July, you're going to hear nothing but baseball Hall of Famers the week of Messina, and I've unearthed 2 Messina conversations I forgot I had. Curt Schilling came down, and he's not a Hall of Famer, but I'm going to treat him like one because he should be. And Curt Schilling came down and did 2 hours of radio with me on December the 23rd, 1993. And I found the tape the other day, dude, and I've never listened to it. I've never played it. But Curt married my best friend growing up, and he was living on the couch across the street on Bank Street after pitching in the World Series. So This was after he pitched that incredible game against the Braves. It's after he pitched the shutout against the Blue Jays. It's after Mitch Williams blew the World Series. So this is about 9 or 10 weeks later, in December, that Curt Schilling bags on Mitch Williams and me a lot. He bagged on me a whole lot. So if you want to hear a very young, cocky 1993 Curt Schilling, and you want to hear Nestor when he did not know what he was doing on the radio. Like, I found a 1992 interview I did with Keith Mills that I actually ran on Tuesday because Keith's retiring. And it was very, very clear I did not know how to do radio in 1992. So I'm even running the embarrassing stuff, which is really cool.
I think you got to go get Curt and get him to come back on, and let's talk about some of this Be More Positive stuff with him and see. He will gladly either put his foot in his mouth or bring up topics that are uncomfortable to talk about. Or
yeah, I've heard his act, and look, I DJ Curt's wedding. I love his wife. I am appreciative for all the times Curt sat with me. I mean, Curt Schilling called me from the hotel in St. Louis in 2004 about 3 hours before the game that they won the World Series that night. So he called me from the hotel after pitching the bloody sock game, right? This is a couple days later. Right. He had pitched in the World Series already. He was not pitching that night because, it was game 5. I think they won in 5 or 4. They won in 4 or 5, whatever it was. They won in St. Louis. He called me that day and talked about what if we win the World Series tonight. So I have that tape too. You're going to hear that. So I mean, it's just an unbelievable amount of stuff. With the real disrespect here, and I want to doff my cap to Keith Mills, and first I'll say happy retirement to Keith. I played 2 pieces that I found with Keith on Tuesday, and you can find them up in the buyatoyota.com audio vault too. If you want to hear a very young green version of me discuss the dream team with Keith in 1992. I had been on the radio alone maybe 8 weeks at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. And then in 1997, at the New Orleans Super Bowl, so that was the Bledsoe, Favre, Desmond Howard Super Bowl, Keith Mills sat with me on the Friday of that Super Bowl at the Hyatt in downtown New Orleans and talked about what an incredible person and player John Ogden was going to be for us. Now, keep in mind, the Ravens were 4-12 that year. Steve Everett was still here. We talked about him. We talked about Ray Lewis briefly. But we talked about what was, and this is a great topic for you, and especially right in the here and now, how the Ravens were going to own Baltimore because of the kind of people they showed themselves to be. And we were 3 years into Angelos at that point and just coming off the ALCS. And Keith and I both talked about how the Ravens were going to own Baltimore, not the Orioles. Now, that was a bold thing for 2 Baltimore guys to say in 1997 with a 4-12 football team. But Keith went on and on and on about how John Ogden's going to be one of the most special individuals we've ever had in Baltimore sports. And this is after 16 games when he was playing guard, right? And the pile-on of that is this. John Ogden sat and did, every single year, John would come out to the barn with me and would make it a point to come out to the barn. And I have all of these long-form chats. There's Putty Hill Station with John in 2004. There is the barn in 2002 with John Ogden. He's always sitting with someone else. This was Casey Robach he was with that night. On one of the other ones, I believe he was with Jim Fossil one night. He came out and did some radio with us that night. So I have all of this John Ogden stuff. I mean, I have hours and hours and hours of John Ogden that I have never run, that I had never transcribed, even when he went in the Hall of Fame, which has been, several years now. 5 years now since J.O. went in the Hall of Fame like that?
Could be.
Yeah. So I did not even transcribe all of that. So I'm going through all, and John comes by every year. John freshens stuff up. I probably have 40 or 50 chats with John Ogden since 1996 lying around. It's been 23 years, So I have all of this John Ogden. I could do a whole day of John Ogden if I wanted to, easily, and then not even repeat anything. So he has been, of all the Hall of Famers we talk about, he's the one without a statue. He's the one that's always around. He's the biggest guy. He was the unquestioned guy. He was the first guy. And yet, Yeah, I'd rather hear from Ray Lewis somehow, some weird way. And even though John always made sense.
And no one's ever said a bad thing about John. No one's ever questioned anything about him. He still is around. Like, you see him all the time.
I text John, he texts me back.
Season. Yeah, I mean, he's a really, it's refreshing. It's nice. He's a good guy to talk with. I mean, I don't pretend to have spent as much time with him as you have, but I've certainly been in the same room with a couple times.
Let's say this, July 10th.
Approachable and nice.
You're driving around July 10th, you put WNST on. You hear me talking to John Ogden in 1998, let's say, about Brian Billick just taking the job. I think that's interesting because I listened to it last week and it was interesting. Hearing what John Ogden had a voidable contract, and it got out in the papers in the offseason when Brian was hired and Marchibroda left, and I vividly remember John Ogden coming out in 1998. I'm trying to think who was with him. I want to say it was Jay Lou. Jay Lou wasn't here yet, maybe. Jay Lou was here. I'm trying to think. He was out with another person, and afterwards we went downstairs and sat at the barn, and Marchibroda was still the coach. And I talked to John about it. I said, well, I'm hearing about this voidable years, and David Modell gave you a special chance to leave if you wanted to. And he said to me, I'm not going to stay here and lose, man. He said, I want to win. He was in a bad mood that night. John wasn't in a bad mood much. But we sat and ate crabs, and John was tired of losing in 1998, like literally tired of losing. And it expressed that to me at the barn. And, a couple months later, he came out and did radio with me, and I have it. And he talked about Brian Billick and how much energy that was bringing to the organization at that time, and that how he didn't want to leave Baltimore, that he wanted to stay, that he loved it here, his family loved it, they could come up and see the games. There was nowhere else he wanted to play. He had his home in Vegas by then, and we talked about that. But this is early John Ogden where he had the ability to leave if he wanted to, and he could have gone anywhere he wanted and would have made every nickel he would have made with the Ravens, if not more, literally, had he left. So, now that we see it and he doesn't have a statue and his name's up and he comes and he goes and he's the gentle giant and all that stuff and the guy that always makes sense, it wasn't always a foregone conclusion he was going to stick around.
Yeah, that's good stuff to know. And then I think when you should encourage people, or you or I or whomever, that when you listen to this stuff that has sort of the historical dust on it, it's like, what are the follow-up questions that now you would ask that you didn't know to ask then, but like now you want to ask? Because it's like, it sounds like this at that time. Is that really true? So that'll be a fun exercise as well.
Well, I got a whole bunch of Cal Ripken stuff. I've got a whole bunch of Brooks Robinson stuff. I've dusted off stuff that literally has never aired and stuff that I talked to George Brett, okay? And George Brett is my all-time favorite baseball player. He was my guy when I was a kid. He was booked onto my national show, and I found the tape of it, and I don't remember doing it. I still haven't listened to it. And here's the best part. Only my producers, who could never spell, would spell George Brett with one T. On the tape. So there you have it there. And that tape also has Evander Holyfield. It has Chris Redmond with a D. That's not a real spelling there. It also has Kellen Winslow, not the one that's going to jail, the dad. And I also have on there Ernie Accorsi, who's in my personal Hall of Fame. So, there's some Hall of Fame. Sony Case is also in my personal Hall of Fame. He's on there too. But the Nasty Interview archives are coming your way in July. All Hall of Famers, all the time. And you might even hear from Regis Philbin before it's all over. I sort of have these wacky celebrities too. Like Ralph Sampson sat in my studio for 2 hours one day. Ralph Sampson was the greatest college basketball player this side of Bill Walton. And Ralph Sampson's not like in the Hall of Fame. He's probably in the college basketball Hall of Fame if I count that. But I'm trying to figure out what a real Hall of Famer is versus a non-Hall of Famer. Like the Curt Schilling argument. Like Curt Schilling should be in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I talked to Roger Clemens. You're going to tell me Roger Clemens is not a Hall of Famer? I'm playing Roger Clemens in July, Bill. So I have, in my own way, sort of broken the rules of what is a Hall of Famer. Just because they don't put sticks in the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer doesn't mean you're not going to hear from Dennis DeYoung, J.Y., and Tommy Shaw in July during Rock Week, because you are.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, you're typically such a conformist, so why would you follow other people's rules? No, I think it's good. I think that's what you should play. It doesn't even have to be Hall of Fame people as much as it's Hall of Fame conversations, right? Like Hall of Fame information, Hall of Fame dialogue, like
my favorite
fun
all-time
stuff that people
conversation
wanna
was
know.
Mary Lou Retton. She's not in the Hall of Fame, but I mean, she's got like more Olympic gold. So I mean, I would consider her a Hall of Famer.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because she's Mary Lou Retton. If you've been on a Wheaties box, you get a special. You get a special thing for that.
Sure.
At Bruce Jenner, I don't know whether having him or her on. Whatever one I will have Bruce Jenner on. If Bruce wants to come on, I'll have the Kardashians on. I had Dorothy Hamill on. So there's another. I had Scott Hamilton on. I had Nadia Comaneci and Bart Connor on. I could do like a whole Olympic week. That's what I'll do. I
like that.
I had Jim McKay on, spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport. Sir Roger Bannister. Do you know who Sir Roger Bannister is?
I do not.
Wow. Okay. So Sir Roger Bannister was the fastest man in the world. And he was made a sir because he was a middle distance runner. He ran the world's first sub 4-minute mile.
I should know that.
1952 Olympics in Helsinki. Sir Roger Bannister sat with me at the Sports Illustrated 2000 awards, as did Mike Eruzione. Eruzione! Do you believe in miracles? I never had Al Michaels on, though, so maybe I should get Al Michaels. So I have all of this stuff. So all of this is running in July, back to back to back to back, and you don't have to suffer listening to last place baseball over on the FM flagship or excuses therefore. We're just going to fast forward you right to Ed Reed's Hall of Fame induction and that first always significant preseason football game in August.
Right. Looking forward to it.
Bill, tell them what you do for 100 years, getting up on roofs, and you are providing the solar that allows me to run. Can we put a solar roof on my head? Give me more energy? Would that work?
We could try. I don't know if your head can support it, but we could try.
Give me a solar hat.
Right. So for 100 years, we've been taking care of the commercial roofs in and around the Baltimore region. Everything from service work, leaks, repairs, up to roof replacements, shopping centers, schools, hospitals, you name it. We are actively trying to help people understand the concept of putting solar on top of their roof and use that commercial space. So it's fun. I have really great people. Everybody loves helping people. When their roof leaks, it's a pretty big crisis. So we are happy to step in and problem solve with them and see if we can help.
So when someone sees their roof leak, like the time between the moment they reach for the phone and like call is like 3, 2, go.
Right. Yeah, typically.
Well, get on the roofs. I know it's hot out there. Hydrate your staff, Bill Cole. Make sure they're well hydrated. I'm hydrated, drinking out of my Cole Roofing mug and Gordian Energy. Bill does roofs, but he also does therapy for me, and I hope that you are enjoying I enjoyed the 100th anniversary of Cole Roofing. I hope you enjoyed the 21st anniversary of WNSD.
Thanks so much, Ness.
Bill Cole, my man, my partner in crime over Cole Roofing. Find them at Gordian Energy as well as each and every Wednesday he comes on. You can find him in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. Incredible month ahead we have here. Yes, you'll hear from Billy Joel a couple of times before July 26th, and maybe even one more if I chase him down between now and then. Cal Ripken is threatening to call in with some fresh content next month as well. We've heard from Bob Costas. We are chasing current Hall of Famers, past Hall of Famers, even deceased Hall of Famers. We're honoring them all during the month of July. It is Hall of Fame month around here. All of it sponsored by all of our friends, including Adams Extreme Motorsports. Follow them online at Adams Jeep, and if you need your Jeep tricked out, they're there for you. They're also having some concerts later on up in Cecil County. Make sure you check that out. Harford County, Cecil County, everywhere you are up in that region. Adams Jeep and Extreme Motorsports will be doing some live shows from their showroom this year as well. Also, Roos Chris. I'll be at Roos Chris on Wednesday night having a big old steak and a chopped salad. The band Chicago in town. It's always a big night for me and my wife. You're the inspiration. Whatever happened to Peter Cetera? I don't know. I know what happened to Roos Chris, though. They've expanded. Odenton, they're still in Annapolis. They're still in Pikesville, and better than ever downtown where I go at Pier 5. We'll see you at Roos Chris. Book your private event. Get in on burger night and take advantage of the happy hour menu prices. Roos Chris. It's always delicious. It's always special, always for special occasions. We appreciate them. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And all breaking news all summer long coming to you courtesy of our friends At Coons Florida, Security Boulevard, Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday, each and every Thursday, driving you home. Tuesday edition on the 4th of July. That'll be on the 2nd, but then back to the normal Thursday for all of July and August and beyond, and of course on Sunday mornings. Dennis sponsors our WNST Tech service. Get your breaking news fast. It's awesome. Subscribe, and you will know how awesome Luke Jones is. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.